I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, and in this job there's plenty of good days, but today is a great day because with me I have the new Hyundai i30 Fastback N, which is a new body style of the hot hatch that really took the world by storm in 2018, didn't it? The i30N's a pretty cool car, but I actually reckon it gets even cooler with this new Fastback shape. It gets more practical as well, because this has actually got the bigger boot of the pair, another 69 litres in fact. And as you can see from all the stuff we've got in here, including the two Chasing Cars suitcases, there's just heaps of room. It's a really practical little sports car. And they've thought of a few different things as well. Not only does this parcel shelf get up and out of your way, there's also shopping bag hooks, there's a 12-volt socket if you need to power a little appliance. And the big aperture that the tailgate enables means it's just super easy to slide stuff in, apart from this lip here. And there is still that fixed bar that sits across the boot, same as the hatchback, but you can remove that if you want to. You just lose a little bit of rigidity. It's not too difficult to close that tailgate. It's manual, however. One thing I like about the Fastback N is this new roofline. It just looks really mature and really sophisticated. And let me know down in the comments, but I don't actually remember seeing a vehicle in this small size use this faster roofline, not in recent years. Kind of reminds me of a little Audi RS5, and I actually reckon that's pretty cool. You don't lose the visual additions of the i30N either. You get the same side skirts down there, same 19-inch wheels wrapped in Pirelli P0HN rubber. They perform well, as we'll find out soon. And of course, around the front, you've got very much a standard PD i30. Pretty handsome looking car in my opinion. Honeycomb grille looks good. You won't be missing the N from the grille badge or the red lipstick down the bottom there. I'm a bit divided on that, but I do reckon the white colour looks good. But what about the interior? They've changed a lot about the exterior, but the dashboard is very reminiscent of the standard i30N. In fact, it's very reminiscent of basically any PD i30. It's quite oppressive and grey. They really do spend their money in this car on mechanicals rather than aesthetics, and or interior aesthetics that is, because the outside looks pretty cool, but I don't mind that. I mean, the dashboard is a bit hard and scratchy, but stuff that really matters, like the steering wheel and the gear shifter, they look and feel really good. Nice and meaty, perforated leather. A big difference between the Fastback and the hatchback is that the hatch's performance blue stitching and highlights, that's swapped out for red in this car. So there's red stitching on the wheel, in the shift boot, on the seats, and even around the outer air vents. So if you're someone that really likes red, then this is a good option for you. The dials are really classic and clear, and the 8-inch touchscreen up here works well. It's got navigation, DAB radio, Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, all standard. Just like any Hyundai, it all just looks really simple and it's easy to use. There's also a fast charging USB port down there, 2 cup holders between the seats, that's good, and a tub between the pews as well. Now, on those seats, this is the base model. Just like the hatch, there'll be a base and a luxury grade in Australia. The base car has these comfortable, supportive cloth seats. You know I like a bit of cloth, especially in high summer like right now. And you also see the inheritance from BMW M, Herr Albert Biermann, who runs the show. You got these nice thigh extenders here in the seat, so basically anyone of any shape and size will be able to get comfy. There's also decent sized door bins, although unlike a Volkswagen, they're not flock lined. But what about the back seat? Well, when I first saw photos of this car, I was a bit worried that cool roofline would mean there'd be no headroom. I was wrong. Turns out there's headroom. Even for me at 6 foot, I've got another ½ inch or so above me. My legroom's okay, but my toe room's not. My feet are pretty well trapped underneath my own seat, so stick to people with short legs or very small feet. You do get some amenities though. There's a flip down armrest with 2 cup holders. The actual seat itself's comfy enough. But there's no air vents. That's a problem in a country like Australia because it's currently like 30 degrees and it's very, very hot back here. The reason there's no air vents is because there's a mechanical handbrake, and any i30 with a mechanical handbrake don't get air vents. Beats me as to why, but a real handbrake's cool because it means you can rip skids in this thing. And I guess that's what an i30N is really all about. What this thing is like to drive. It looks cool outside, but does the Fastback live up to the reputation of this car? So, what's the i30 Fastback N like to drive? Well, it won't shock you to learn that in many ways this is a very similar hot hatch to the standard i30N, which we drove extensively last year and liked a lot. That said, there are a few differences and we will come to those, but I'd like to start with what the two i30N shapes share. And that's that in Australia they both have the same 2-litre turbocharged 4-cylinder petrol engine. We only get one tune out here. We don't get the lower global tune. All we get is what's referred to as the N performance overseas, with 202 kilowatts of power and 353 newton meters of torque. That torque goes up to 378 newton meters on overboost. Just like in the hatch, this is a really strong engine. If you're into these kind of fast hatchbacks, you'll know that 202 kilowatts of power is pretty good. It puts it closer to a Golf R than a Golf GTI in terms of outputs, although of course the Fastback N, just like the i30N, is front-wheel drive. We still think that Hyundai are going to do a really high-powered version of this car later with all-wheel drive, but still no official word on that front. And, you know, many of the driving dynamics are akin to a classic front-wheel drive hot hatch, with one exception, and that's that the Fastback N, like its hatchback sibling, is pretty heavy, and in fact it's a little bit heavier than the hatch overall. That said, it doesn't actually feel heavier or cumbersome to drive on the road at all. Probably the best trait of the i30N is that it has a nice tight front end. It's got lots of grip. Pirelli P0 tires will definitely do that, but it's also very tractable. There's a standard front end limited slip differential and that works really well. Drive out of corners is strong, but that said, the Fastback and the standard i30N, they're both pretty heavy on their front ends, and anecdotally from owners, it seems like they go through front tires pretty quickly too. This is definitely a pretty focused hot hatch. The suspension is forgiving enough to drive daily if you use the normal mode, or effectively what is a comfort mode on the suspension. Dial it up to Sport or Sport Plus though and things get pretty stiff. But one of the best things about the Fastback N is that it allows you so much customization of the dynamics. You can choose how firm you want the suspension. You can choose how much effort the power steering uses. You can choose how responsive the engine is, the ferocity of the rev match downshifts, how much the LSD bites. There's a huge amount of customization through the N mode. For me, I prefer to have the suspension and the steering slackened off, but everything else at their most aggressive setting. Still really like the manual gearbox. The Fastback N is also manual only for now. An 8-speed dual clutch auto remains in development, but we probably won't see that until around Christmas 2019 at the earliest. That said, a hot hatch should have a manual, shouldn't it? And the i30N really stands in comparison to cars like the Golf GTI, which are now auto only in Australia. Of course, there's a massive market for auto gearboxes in this type of car, but for the purists, a great 6-speed like this one is hard to go past. And it's even easy to drive as a manual because, as I said, it has rev match downshifts. So if you haven't done much manual driving, you'll still be able to pick up the i30N really quickly. And then there's the sound this thing makes, which really elevates it to the top of the hot hatch pack in terms of that indulgent driver experience. I think this is one thing the i30N gets so right, and the Fastback doesn't change it. It's just got a terrific sounding exhaust, heaps of snap, crackle and pop. It's really loud both inside and outside the car. If you want it to be, it's customizable. You can dull it right off. You can drive the thing in eco mode if you want to, but for me, I love the noise it makes with the exhaust in Sport Plus, so I basically keep it there all the time. Apologies to my neighbors for the cold starts in the mornings. But, you know, there's one thing that remains a criticism of the i30N for me, and that is just the mass of it. You know, it's probably carrying a good 150 kilos more than it really should, and that means that it isn't a very delicate hot hatch to drive. Classic hot hatch dynamics are a nice nimble front end and a light rear end that is prone to a bit of lift-off oversteer. I said quite a bit that the i30N hatch didn't have really either of those characteristics in spades. It's quite a heavy, hefty front end. It drives out of corners really well thanks to the strong engine and the LSD, but it's not darty like a Peugeot 308 GTI. nor does it have a rear end that likes to play like a Golf GTI. It does have a more playful rear end than the hatchback. I found it a lot easier to put the back out slightly, either on lift-off or induced by a little bit of a shove of the brakes. And it's actually a more fun car to drive for me than the i30N hatch. I would still prefer it to be a bit lighter, but finally I've managed to get an i30N to have a bit more of a play with me at road speeds. On a track, they're all phenomenal, but you don't drive, you know, sort of track speeds on the public road, at least you really shouldn't. But the i30N or the Fastback N is quite happy to engage with you more on that level, which is great. So those are my impressions of the Hyundai i30 Fastback N. Now, I was already a fan of the i30N, but one of my biggest criticisms of the car has been that it hasn't been as playful as a number of other hot hatches out there. But you know what? I reckon this one actually fixes it. It uses its back end more, which really helps this hot hatch dynamically. In all other aspects, this is still a really cool and really fun car. It's comfortable, you can use it every day, it's properly quick, it's manual only, which we purists love. I also reckon it looks pretty good. Now, if you like this video, make sure to like it below, leave a comment, and subscribe for our weekly in-depth Australian car reviews.